Yo, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel, and today I'm going to be giving my Orlando Regionals tournament report today because I just got back from Orlando Regionals. I just got back from like a 5 a.m., 6 a.m. flight, so I'm pretty exhausted. Obviously, been sleeping all day and stuff, but I had a blast this weekend at Orlando, and I ended up playing Ancient Box to Orlando. Yeah, I played a one prize deck to Orlando. I don't think a lot of people really expected me to play Ancient Box because I kind of teased what I was playing on Twitter, but nobody really knew what I was playing. Everyone was guessing that it was going to be like Roaring Moon, the Dunsparce. But yeah, I did play the Koraidon of Roaring Moon deck here. This deck did get second place at the tournament, so I want to say it was a decent meta call for this tournament. I thought it was a pretty strong deck, and I'm going to give you my tournament run, why I played the list, the inclusions, the cards, all that stuff in today's video. If y'all are new to the second channel, make sure to subscribe down below. We're getting very close to 13,000 subs, and if you're going to enjoy the video, leave a like. I do want to thank everybody who came up to me and said hi at Orlando Regionals. As always, it's a pleasure meeting people, and I love interacting with people, love talking to people, love chatting with people. So I want to thank you all once again for all the support this weekend and all the people that came up and said hi and all that good stuff. Yeah, I just got back from Orlando. Like I said, had a pretty busy weekend. Obviously, Friday, Saturday, we practiced for the tournament, then we played in the tournament, and then on Sunday was a pretty busy day. It was day 2, and then we went out for food after, and then Monday I took an extra day in Orlando with all my friends to go to Universal, which was pretty fun. I'm not gonna lie, Universal was a fun time for sure. I think it was the first time I've ever been there before, so it was like a first time experience, which was pretty sick. But that was a lot of fun to go to Universal, kind of take the day off. It was like a mini vacation, to be honest. Florida's a really, like, tropical place, which I like the tropical vibes. Coming from Canada, where it's always cold and sometimes it gets dull up here, it is nice to kind of get away and do that. But, yeah, I went to Orlando this weekend, got 139th place. I ended up getting back-to-back day 2s at Orlando Regionals, which I was actually hoping I was going to do this weekend. That was one of my goals this weekend, was to try to get day 2, because I got day 2 last year at Orlando, because that was my first ever day 2 at a Regionals was last year in Orlando. So I was really happy to run it back at Orlando, play another one prize deck, and get day 2 again. I didn't have the same run I did. I didn't start off 6-0, but I did have a pretty fun tournament nonetheless, and I was really happy with the deck I played. Like I said, I got second place, and even if I ran the tournament back and Ancient Box didn't get, like, second place, probably still would have played the deck because it was a lot of fun to play. I couldn't really justify myself playing something like Charizard or something, but I will go over my run here and why I played at the deck. So the Ancient Box 60 is very similar to Gabriel Fernandez's 60. I think I said that it was like the same, like almost the same 60 minus 1 Koraidon plus Cobalion. I lied. There is there's one less fighting energy in the deck. I threw in a 7th Dark Energy and cut one of the fightings out of the deck. That was the other change I made to the deck, but it was basically just Gabriel Fernandez's list. I've been testing the list ever since his run at EUIC. I was very interested in the deck itself. I actually was very high on Ancient Box before the set came out, Temporal Forces. So this is a deck that I was always like wanting to try out. I just never got around to doing it. I did a YouTube video on the deck recently. I played a bit of it on my stream, and I was really liking the deck, and I was like, all right, you know what? I'm a big fan of Gabriel 60. I'm going to run it. I think it's a good play for this tournament. I think an all-one price deck is really strong. Obviously, we all know Charizard is going to be one of the big decks going in the tournament, but this deck has a very good matchup into other archetypes like Lost Box, like Lost Tina, like Shen Pao. All those matchups are pretty favored, and I did expect a good amount of those decks to be popular within this tournament, not just Charizard. I ended up playing against 3 Charizard throughout the entire tournament in both day 1 and day 2 combined, which was pretty interesting. But yeah, this is the 60 I played. The only changes I made, like I said, I added a 7th Dark Energy in the deck. I found that in testing, it was nice to have the 7th Dark Energy because it makes it easier to chain attacks with Roaring Moon. And then there's obviously the 3 Koraidon. So Koraidon's a pretty strong card. It does 30 damage for each of your ancient Pokemon in play. So if you fill your board up, you're doing 180 damage for 2 energy. The reason why I cut one is because Koraidon is not always the best attacker in the deck. I mean, you're only really using it, honestly, at the beginning of the game. I found myself never really using Koraidon past, like, the first, like, 3 prizes I've taken. So, like, I don't really use Koraidon that often in the late game. So I was like, well, it's not very helpful in the late game. It is nice to have the 4 Koraidon because it just means more Pokemon to put in the, or more ancient cards to put in the discard pile for Roaring Moon's Vengeful Fletching attack. The Koraidon just didn't feel like I needed a 4th one. What I did want to play in the deck, however, was a Cobalion. Charizard is very tough for this deck to beat, in my opinion. Even though you can theoretically two-shot them, you should, at one point, just hopefully win the prize trade, especially in the late game if you can get a big knockout on Charizard. My issue is Charizard is playing double Tauros scenario now, so ever since Tor's build, one UIC, everyone's been high on the double Turos and the Charizard, which makes it very tough for a deck like this to take down Charizard, because Charizard's got 330 HP. This deck plays, I think, 28 ancient cards. I counted. It was 28. And that means, realistically, you're going to need a pretty good amount of luck to get that one shot at the right moment. So the Cobalion really helps. At that point, you just need 23 ancient cards in your discard pile for Cobalion in play, so your Moon can one-shot a Charizard. So it wasn't that hard to kind of map that out in a game where it's like, okay, I have to discard 23 ancient cards so that I can bench Cobalion, I can KO a Charizard in one hit. Easy peasy. I get the job done, no problem. So I added the Cobalion on the deck. It did win me a game against Charizard. Unfortunately, 2 of my losses this weekend were still the Charizard regardless. So maybe going back, I would probably just cut the Cobalion, because I didn't beat the 2 Charizards, 2 of the Charizards I hit anyways, which I'll talk about in my tournament report. But I don't know, the Cobalion I still like. I think it's still good. The other big thing the Cobalion really helps in is actually the Roaring Moon matchups. So I'm not talking about the Mirror Match Ancient Box. I'm talking about the Dunsparce Roaring Moon deck, or just like a Roaring Moon EX deck in general. It's actually really good to have Cobalion, because you can win the prize trade more favorably, because you do have the ability to make it easier for you to kill those other Roaring Moons in one hit, especially before they do. And if you can get an Ancient Booster Capsulon, it's really, really good. Every card was very useful in the deck. Like, I think literally there's no dead weight in the deck at all. Like, Penny did win me a game. Obviously, Sada and Explorer really good. 2 Counter Catchers really clean. Superior Retrieval was insane. I was never really into this card in Ancient Box until, like, Gabriel played it, and, like, I tried it out in the deck. I'm like, okay, so yeah, Superior Retrieval is, like, broken in this deck. It's actually a very, very good card. The highlight of the deck, in my opinion, though, was the Pokestops. Pokestop is so good with Ancient Box. I think it's better than Artisan. Artisan is nice because you get basics in play. But Pokestop is just so much better, because not only are you able to fuel Roaring Moon's attack, but you're also able to dig for more items like your Pokegears or your Awakening Drum or your Vessels and your Superior Retrieval, your Counter Catchers. There was a lot of games I had where I needed a Pokestop to hit me a Pokegear in order to stay in the game, and it did do that. Now, if you want to hear what I was going to play other than Ancient Box, because that was my main pick this weekend was Ancient Box. I tested it for like the week since the UIC. My other pick was going to be Arctina. Now, I want to give a big shout out to my crew here that I traveled with. They all played the same 60 Arctina deck to Orlando, and they all got day 2. My friend Sashi ended up getting top 16 with Arctina. Their build was all about playing 4 of Trekking Shoes to help with the consistency of the deck, getting Torment Energy Arc a lot easier. And every one of them that played that same 60 got day 2. So I'm a big shout out to them, because that was my other deck. They were all trying to get me on the deck, and that was going to be my backup plan. If I didn't like Ancient Box, if I found that it wasn't testing very well, or I fell off the deck, I was going to switch over and play the Arctina deck. Because you know me, I love me some Arceus. That was definitely going to be my second pick. And I also debated playing Lugia this weekend too, which I don't know, maybe Lugia would have been a good play too, not going to lie. But I think it's time to get into the tournament report here. So, starting these off, we do have, unfortunately, no more Pokestats live to make it easier to do the tournament report, so you're going to have to follow along with me here. But round number 1, I played against Brendan. He was playing a Lost Zone Charizard EX deck. Something that caught me off guard. I didn't expect this. It was an interesting matchup. I think game 1, he was unable to get a Charizard out until a bit later in the game. I kind of had a slow setup, though, game 1, and then I think in game 2, I think game 1 I won with the Cobalion. I took the winning attack on his Charizard with Cobalion. I think in game 2, just kind of the same thing, just a bit of a back and forth. He was getting Charizards out a little bit more consistently, though, which was a little bit more scarier. The thing with the Lost Zone deck is that you're not able to always get Charizard Rare Candy, because it's a little bit harder. You're relying more on your Comfeys and your Colruses. He was also playing some interesting tech cards. He had Shiyu EX in the deck. I think game 1, he Lost Zoned to Shiyu EX, which I was like, okay, that's pretty scary. I'm not going to lie. I got to be a little careful, because Ancient Box can get their deck very, very thin by the end of the game, and sometimes you can just randomly get decked out. So I was like, okay, I got to keep that in mind now. He's got a Shiyu. He had Radiant Charizard in the deck. It was an interesting 16. I like the spice. I think what helped, obviously, is that, there was no, healing in the deck like Turo, so 2 Charizard, and then, obviously, the Cobalion being very useful. In round 2, I played against Luis Morales, who was playing the Shenpao EX deck. I was happy to see the Shenpao was, obviously, a very good matchup for Roaring Moon. I played against, 3 Shenpao throughout the entire tournament, and I beat them all, because Shenpao is a good matchup for Roaring Moon, mainly because Roaring Moon is really tough to knock out in one hit. It has 140 HP. Even the Baxcalibur falls short by 10 damage. Greninja doesn't do enough. Iron Hands doesn't do enough, which is one of the big things that helps is that Iron Hands can't one-shot a Roaring Moon with this. And then, obviously, Shenpao is our only thing that can use against you, but ideally, you're either too shy in the Shenpao at the beginning of the game if they start with it, or eventually, by the time they use it by the third or fourth turn of the game, your Roaring Moon should already be doing 220 damage by that point, and that's basically how the matchup goes, and I think both games in round 2, it's kind of how they went. One thing that can be awkward, though, is like if your opponent's able to use Greninja multiple times in a game and sets up damage for like multiple Iron Hands in a game, that's where things get sketchy. I do think that in I think it was game 2 in round 2, I did open Flutter Mane, which is big. Flutter Mane is really good in this matchup because you basically shut off Shivery Chill. You can shut off Greninja if they start with it. Yeah, Flutter Mane's really good in this matchup. You do got to be mindful, though, of how many Flutter Manes you put into play, though. That's just because you can run into a Greninja snipe and take out 2 Flutter Manes. You have to have a booster capsule on at least one of them, I think, in my opinion, because this matchup can be tough if you have 2 Flutter Mane in play, because then your opponent go Greninja 2 Flutter Mane. They have to go 4 Pokemon, and that's not very hard for them to do. So, I don't know. It's like, Flutter Mane's good in this matchup in the early game, but I don't recommend putting, like, a bunch in play, even though sometimes you'll play against Iron Bundle within Shenpao. All right, round number 3. I did take an L, and this was to Espathra. Well, probably my worst matchup, if I had to be honest with you. If I had to see any deck this weekend, I did not want it to be Espathra. And unfortunately, round number 3, I hit an Espathra. Nothing you can really do about that, obviously. Just kind of a bad matchup. I tried my hardest. Obviously, I got 2-0'd. It didn't really have a great matchup against it. League Headquarters is really scary. I lost on my Pokestop in game 1 pretty quickly. I did try, though, because like if I was able to keep chaining Sada's Vitalities and I can keep up the energy on my moons, I can still do some damage, but the Espathra had the Rigid Band, and then the Hero's Cape in the deck made it really difficult, too. It's just overall a pretty bad matchup, and I ended up getting 2-0'd. Round number 4 was against Future Hands, however, and it was a very intense set. I think he won game 1, I won game 2. Game 3 was very close, and I think the thing that happened in game 3 in this round was that my opponent Pokestopped early on in the game to try to get like a Techno Radar. They ended up milling 2 of their Iron Crowns at the beginning of the game off of Pokestop that they played, and unfortunately this meant that in the late game, to close the game out, they needed the 2 Iron Crowns in order to win the game, and unfortunately, they Pokestopped them way early on, and they were not able to get the 2 Iron Crowns out. They had game, most likely, had they not milled the Iron Crowns with the Pokestop. So, Pokestop giveth, and Pokestop taketh. Round number 5, I played against Anthony, who was playing the Towardzar deck, I think, and got completely destroyed. I mean, both games, I ended up having some pretty bad draws. That's the one thing I wanted to mention about this Ancient Box deck. The draw sometimes can be pretty abysmal. I mean, it's a very bricky, like, kind of deck. Your draw engine is literally a Radiant Greninja, and sometimes your Pokestops are how you're finding your vessels and your Pokegears. So it can be a bit of a scary situation when the deck kind of falls flat on its face. And unfortunately, I fell flat on my face against Charizard, which, like, again, not the greatest matchup anyways, especially the Tord build. The Tord build specifically was a bad matchup. So I was like, all right, if the deck's going to brick for, like, one game, I'm fine with this. Because, like, game 1, he just rolled me. And then game 2, I made him go first, obviously, and he still had turn 2 Charizard Pidgeot regardless. He didn't even use a Rotom, so I was like, oh, this is not looking good. Bro still had the turn 2 Pidgeozard without even needing Rotom or anything when I made him go first. So that was already a bad sign, and then a lot of my Pokegears I kept playing this round, I kept whiffing Sada's Vitalities, and I was like, oh my god. So it was just, it was a bit of a wash, nothing you can really do. Charizard just, if they get, like, turn 2 Pidgeozard up, I mean, this deck kind of suffers a little bit, I'm not going to lie. You do have the Ancient Booster Capsules. So, like, if you don't take an early knockout with Roaring Moon, you can put, like, a capsule on it so Charizard can't one-shot you, which is a decent play, but, like, they have Lost Vacuum, and I think in Pidgeot for any card out of their deck, I don't think that's a reliable strategy, but it is unfortunate. I mean, Charizard is just the big bad boogeyman of the format right now, and this deck got completely destroyed by it. I think, like, game 1, he was able to, like, Turo twice, which was really bad, too. It's, like, it's just bad. When they can Turo and fully heal your 2-shot, it's, like, I don't know, man. Charizard's OP, and I took a big L there. But round number 6, I did play against Jane. And they were playing a Lost Zone Raging Bolt deck. So I was actually having a lot of fun this game. Me and Jane were having a lot of fun, I think, playing this match. And I was really interested in Jane's deck. I mean, Lost Zone Raging Bolt is something that I've thought of myself. I just did a video on Raging Bolt Gardevoir, so I definitely want to get out a video on Lost Zone Raging Bolt at some point. There's a ton of ways to play it. But again, with most Lost Zone decks for my Roaring Moon deck, it's obviously very favored for me. Jane did put up a good fight, though, in I think both games. The Raging Bolt was pretty scary. It does have 240 HP. It actually is a little bit bulkier than most base EXs, so it's a little bit harder to knock out. And obviously, it can easily one-shot me in return. But again, just Roaring Moon being very bulky in this matchup was really, really good. And just having 140 HP against Lost Zone decks is insane. Because, like, you can't get killed in one hit by Cram or Sableye or Greninja. It's really tough for them to keep up, in my opinion, when you can just kind of get a bunch of moons in play and you're just swinging back and forth. And, like, Flutter Mane was really good. I think I started Flutter Mane in game 2. But then in round 7, I played against James, who was playing the Shempao deck once again. And, like I said, it's a decent matchup. I think we went to game 3. Was it? I can't remember. I'm not going to lie. I'm still kind of tired. But I can't remember if we went to game 3 or not. But it was against Shempao once again. And we had a good set. Once again, we had a lot of fun. Every one of my opponents, by the way, I enjoyed playing against. It was a lot of fun. This was definitely a good matchup for me. Like I said, Shempao being good for Roaring Moon. Just Roaring Moon can easily handle the matchup. I can't remember everything that went down this matchup, unfortunately. Just kind of a blur. But round number 8 was against Thomas Sullivan, who was playing the Great Tusk deck. I almost said Iron Treads. The Great Tusk. They were playing Great Tusk Mill. I was like, okay. He mulliganed at first, and I saw that he had a Great Tusk. It was Great Tusk. I'm like, oh, it's Great Tusk. That's a good matchup because, to be fair, my Roaring Moon does a lot of damage, and his attack helps my Roaring Moon. However, game 1, I did take an L. I actually started Koraidon, which is really annoying. I ended up finding my penny in time to go into Roaring Moon, but like starting Koraidon is really bad because I don't want to put a bunch of Pokemon in play because he can like counter catch a trap and stuff like that. I don't play any switch in here other than a penny. So I was like, oh, starting Koraidon in this situation feels pretty bad. Because if I'm going into a matchup blind with this deck, usually if I have the option to start Koraidon or Moon, I start Koraidon. Or Fluttermane Moon, I'm starting Fluttermane. So I was like, oh no. Starting Koraidon was bad. I lost game 1. He ended up decking me out. I think I was 1 turn away from winning, but he decked me out. Game 2, it was a pretty, like, back and forth. I started Fluttermane, and I was like, oh, where's my Roaring Moons at? But starting Fluttermane's not as bad as starting Koraidon, I guess. And he ended up getting to a point, though, where he just couldn't keep up the attacks. He just started to get a little bit bricky. Like, in the beginning and middle of the game, he was able to, like, get a lot of attacks off and mill me and consistently chain everything. But it came to a point where he just wasn't able to find supporters, and I think he just ran out of steam when he needed to, like, get me, when my deck was starting to get really thin. And then game 3, we ended up... I ended up winning. It was another interesting scenario where my opponent just unfortunately just bricked again. They just weren't able to really find any supporter cards. They found an Explorer, but the Explorer just wasn't enough to keep them in the game. They can only take 2 cards. So yeah, it was a unfortunate like break for my opponent, but that's one of the issues with the Great Tusk deck. It's very strong when it can kind of flow together with all the supporters, but when you brick, it's not as good, obviously. But GG's. It was a pretty interesting matchup, and now I kind of know more about the Tusk matchup, because I thought it was going to be pretty easy, but it was a lot harder than I thought. And then round 9, I hit my friend Marvin. We both ID'd. I think literally before the round started, we were like, okay, if we pair each other, we'll give each other the idea. And we're like, all right, chill. And then it happened. I was like, okay, cool. So yeah, starting off in day 2 at a 6-2-1 record. I mean, I would have been nice to go like 7-2, but like I said, me and my friend decided to ID. Round 10, I was up against Julio, who's playing the Moon at the Dunsparce deck, which I thought was a fine matchup because, oh yeah, they put a Roy Mooney X in play. I got a Cobalion. I should be able to KO that pretty easily at some point in the game and win the prize trade. Game 1, he basically just kind of attacked first. That's basically the matchup. Whoever attacks first wins and takes the first KO, I should say, not attacks first, but whoever takes the first knockout does win the matchup, and that is exactly what happened in round 10. Both games, he took the first knockout, and game 2, he just kept his board all one-prizers the entire game, and I just couldn't keep up. And then round 11, I played against my friend Sammy, who was once again playing Charizard with like the Tord build. He also had a Hero's Cape in the deck, which was like really bad for me. I can't do anything against Hero's Cape. Game 1 got destroyed. Game 2, he had a really like bricky start, but because he still managed to get a Charizard in the second turn of the game, he just kind of kept up momentum. And I think I had a few turns where I did whiff energies and attacks, and I think my last prize was my Super Rod, which was a big deal. It was my last prize, either a Dark Energy or a Super Rod, because he did Eerie me both games. He played Eerie in his deck, right? So he Eeried me both games and was able to discard my Super Rods, and I was like, oh no. Because game 2, I had both Rods in my hand at the beginning of the game, and I played one early on just in case he Eeried me. And then I was right, because the next turn, he Eeried me, and I was like, oh, okay, good thing I played the Super Rod before he got wasted. But I ended up taking the L there. Like I said, Tordzard, it's pretty bad. This is where the comeback came into fruition. I was hoping to try to go 4-2 on the day. So yeah, round 12, playing against Logan, who's playing the Shempao deck once again. Like I said, Shempao, very good matchup for Roaring Moon. Just kind of went the way I wanted it to go. Roaring Moon just puts in a lot of work, does a lot of damage. And then round 13, played against Evan, who was playing the Snorlax Stall deck, which was another pretty good matchup because I do play Penny and Palpad, which was obviously a very important deal to have within this matchup. And also, Roaring Moon is a fantastic attacker in this matchup. Roaring Moon is so strong, you can just sit there and hit with Roaring Moon every single turn. And eventually you can get to a point where you can easily one-shot a Snorlax with Roaring Moon. Even if they have a Hero's Cape on, you should be able to one-shot the Snorlax. You basically just need to manage your resources really well in the game. One of my objectives against Snorlax here was every time I drew like Explorer, I would always just immediately play the Explorer because I was trying to immediately discard my Greninjas, or my Greninja, my Cobalion, my Koraidons. I wanted to discard all those Pokemon. I did not want my opponent to Erica those into play. Obviously, if Greninja or Cobalion gets stuck in the active, I do have a Penny, but it's like not ideal. So a lot of my strategy this game was holding on to my Vessels, my Ultra Balls, my Superior Retrieval. Even if I see a Pokestop, I'm going to play it early on just to try to discard any Pokemon I can. And basically, I just want to put 2 Roy Moon in play. He didn't play Radiant Charizard, which is a big deal. That's like, I had to play around Radiant Charizard, so I put 2 moons down, obviously, both games, predicting that he had Radiant Charizard. He didn't have it. After the game, I asked him if he had it. He didn't have it. But yeah, part of my objective of this game was just aggressively just discarding cards just to try to get rid of any Pokemon that clog my deck and hand up that he can trap with Erica. And that's, part of the strategy that I did in this matchup. And also just trying to do as much damage as quick as possible with Moon. Just put on a ton of pressure with the Roy Moon. Just try to be able to one-shot the Snorlaxes as soon as possible. And that's the strategy. And then round 14... played against Jim, who was playing the Lugia V-Star deck, and this was a matchup I was actually a little scared of. Lugia is not a bad matchup, but it is scary if they get turn 2 attack. It's actually really hard to keep up momentum if they get an early lead against you. If they can take like 2 prizes, and at that point, if you can't knock out their Lugia, you probably will lose the prize trade, because they can attack you with Snorlax, they can attack you with Cinchinos, and eventually they will win the prize trade, especially if they can get that Lugia off the board. So yeah, you got to be very cautious in this matchup. It's really about just like trying to get as much damage on the Lugias as you can early on. Try to attack as quick as possible. KO Lugia V-Star before they take too many prizes with it, because at that point you're gonna end up losing the prize trade. But I think both games he just didn't have like the quickest setup. He had to read the wind a couple times, which was really big for me. I think both games was like turn 3 Archeops. That was kind of the big deal. And then round at 15, I ended up playing against Walter, who was playing the Turbo Roy Moon deck. So not Roy Moon Dunsparce, Turbo Moon with like Mew and Squawkabilly. Did have the 1 prize of Moons in the deck. Obviously, good matchup for me because I do have the Cobalion, and he's more attacking me with the Roy Moon EX in this matchup. So Cobalion just makes a big difference. Game 1, unfortunately, I had a very slow start. I started double Flutter Mane. I kept passing for like 2 or 3 turns, but Pokestop kept bailing me out. I kept spamming Pokestop, and eventually I was able to find Pokegears to get me into the game. And I almost made a big comeback in Game 1. Still lost, unfortunately, because I think it came down to like, I Palpated Boss back. I had Boss in the deck for game, but he Iono'd me, and I was like, okay, it's Boss in the deck. I didn't draw the Boss with the Iono to 2, so I need to Pokestop to try to get a Pokegear. I Pokestop, or it's like I had a Greninja or something. I had to do some kind of sequencing to draw cards, and I Pokestopped immediately, and the first card was Boss, and I conceded. And then Game 2, I ended up winning. In Game 3, we made a gentleman's agreement on board state because we were going to go to time, unfortunately, so we did a gentleman's on board state. This was going to be the potential winning in for top 64, so it was a big deal. So we were like, yeah, one of us could make top 64. We should do a gentleman's agreement, so we did that on board state. And it was looking pretty good for me at the beginning, but in the end, I ended up taking the L on the board state because I didn't have an energy on my active Roy Moon. So basically, his Roy Moon in the active, I had a potential KO. I had Rod, Nest Ball in hand because I did discard my Cobalion earlier on in the game. So I could have went Rod, Nest Ball, Cobalion back into play. The problem is I did not have an energy for my active Roy Moon. I only had 1 energy on it. Yes, yeah, I could Rod the Cobalion back in the deck, Nest Ball into play. I just only had 1 energy on my active Roy Moon, though, which was the problem. So what happened was we were like, okay, if you top deck an energy, it's, game. So I top decked, and it was a counter catcher. So it was not energy. And technically that turn I had no way to attack, so eventually, I got to give my opponent the win. The next card, however, was a Dark Energy. I was like, oh, come on, it was the next card. But, yeah, had to honor the gentleman's agreement there on a board state. I probably could have won the set if I didn't have that, like, slow start. It really sucks, like, that first game, just having the double Flutter Mane start, having to, like, pass for, like, 3 turns in a row just to even find a supporter. Felt really bad. But that ultimately is the downfall of Ancient Box, is it is a bit of a bricky pile. And sometimes you will get these really slow starts where you got no supporters, you got no Greninja, sometimes you prize Greninja. And that's kind of the downfall of this deck. But it is a very fun deck to play, and I do not regret playing it. I ended up going into the day at ending the tournament, sorry, at 139th place, which I'm pretty happy about. I mean, I was hoping to get top 64, obviously, but it is what it is. The deck did do me proud, and I really enjoyed playing the deck. I think if I were to run the tournament back once again, I would still play this deck. It's a blast to play. I definitely recommend trying out Ancient Box. It did get second at the tournament, so I'm sure it's going to have a lot more more popularity now, like live and stuff, just because it did get second place and more eyes are on it. But I definitely recommend giving this deck a try. It's a lot of fun to play, and I highly recommend it. But once again, thank you to everybody who came up to me in Orlando this weekend, who said hi and got me to sign something, took a picture with them. All the good stuff. It was a pleasure. meeting everybody. And I'm happy that I was able to do well at Orlando again. It was a lot of fun. Orlando was a wild time for sure, and I definitely had a lot of fun once again this weekend. Hope you enjoyed today's video on my tournament report and all that good stuff. If you did, leave a like. New to the channel, make sure to subscribe down below and all that good stuff. And that's going to be it for me. And I'll see you all on another video here on the second channel. We actually got a lot of second channel content to make, so daily uploads on the second channel here will be in full force because there are a lot of things that happened this weekend that I was not able to cover. We're going to have to cover them very soon. So see you all later. Bye-bye.